fail. Hey everyone, it's Kris from the Reformed Grognard, and I'm here today to do a little introductory map making. I have always loved maps, but I've never really made a lot of maps. I literally have books on maps sitting around the house here, ancient ones, weird fantasy maps. I follow a dozen map makers on Instagram at least, but I've never really had a reason to dive into map making specifically. But I've been following WASD 20 on YouTube for a while now, and he's got a series on like starting map making and then progressing into a full thing, and it's always been kind of relaxing for me to watch, and I love looking at maps and the intricacies in them. And I've just recently, both my wife and I have started to write fantasy series, and like any good fantasy series, you need a good map at the front of the book. And honestly, the one I'm working on involves a lot of sea travel and distances, and having a map to base it off of would be very helpful. So I've decided I'm going to do a series of kind of quickie videos of me working on learning how to make a map, figuring out what I like and don't like, and making adjustments from there. And to start, I thought we would work on the full kind of world overview map of my main world that I'm working on in my fantasy novel. The world's called Somnerra, and it's loosely D&D based, but it's got some similar races and that type of thing, but the magic's quite a bit different. The world's much different. There's a bit of black powder rifle work and magic, and anyway, I'm excited about it, but it needs a world. So we're going to use WASD 20's method, and I think he got it from somebody else, and if I remember who, I'll watch the video and link it in the video on there. But what he uses in it are beans, and beans give this like natural randomized shape that works really well for maps, from what I was seeing. Never tried this, we'll see how it goes, but let's find out. So I got these nice little black beans. We have a store called Winco here in Idaho. So they've got bulk there. I think this entire bag of beans cost me like 23 cents or something like that. And they're super fun. I love these little guys. They're easy to play with, they're easy to move around. They do roll a bit, but that's okay. So my world has three major land masses. There's one over here that we'll kind of stretch out for now and just kind of let it be as it is. There's one that's kind of attached to that one below. Then over here we've got kind of I've kind of plotted this out in my head, but I've never really put it to paper, so this is kind of a play around session here as much as anything. So this is the major landmass over on this side, and it is largely unexplored, but it does have an additional portion down below. And then like any good planet, we've got some ice along the bottom here, but I'm not too worried about that right now. Up along the top here, we've got a couple of divisions in layouts. We're going to kind of swap these around a little bit. Bring this down here. I think we're going to give this a little bit of a outrigging. Now I just made the United States and South America. That's lovely. That is not my intent here. One thing that I definitely like about the beans is it forces me to think about some different layouts that I wouldn't have normally gone with. But it is a little trickier than just sketching on paper is, for better or worse, I think, as far as that's concerned. I think it's kind of fun to be able to take these and kind of spread them out and get an idea for the scale without necessarily seeing the scale, so to speak. So we do have a little bit of a finger along the top here where things want to connect but don't. So we're going to play with that a little bit there. And then down below, it's a little of a stranger shape thing there. We'll see. The little bay here is a very important part. This is our shimmering sea of Somnerra, and we need more beans. Get some more beans, it's important. So let's go with, oh, look at that lovely heart shape I just inadvertently put there. Beans are hard to work with, man. I do like them, but they're hard to work with. So we are going to throw a little bit of an arm out this way, and what they call the arm on the other side as well, which is more of a divided line of islands there. Got a couple down here. This is a line of islands more than anything, but I kind of think the beans, from a scale standpoint, are too big to act for that particular type of setup for this, but that's okay. It's close. It gives me a good approximation of what I want my world to look like anyway. Not 100% perfect, but it's an interesting start. This kind of fades off into the map here. I always tend to go too elaborate with my maps on here, but it's important that there's a big dead space on either side here. My book takes a lot of its action in the two major bay areas of the two land continents, and so the space in between is kind of the vital area to know how far they are, what kind of distance we're talking, so that I kind of have an idea of how things work there. So we're gonna pretend like that's pretty good right there. We're gonna take my pencil and just start kind of outlining things here. I'm not gonna worry too much about stuff. I think what I will probably end up doing with this is actually you know what, there's actually a little bit of a Panama situation going on here, so I need to redo that. There we go. I'm not going to go too close to it because, again, this is the greater world at large here, not something as detailed as a full line of things. So I'm not going to go super strict with the bean outline here, but we're going to let it guide us a little more than I think I would have had I been doing this by myself anyway. Did I get that whole thing? I don't know. I don't think I did up here, did I? We'll pretend like I didn't anyway. The beans move as much as they stay here, but that's okay. The beans do what the beans do. So Somnerra is going to be my first fantasy story. Actually, I've written a post-apocalyptic noir and a kid's ghost story, both of which have massively overdue sequels that are in progress as well. Got a couple of horror stories that I've been working on, but Somnerra is kind of it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. It's a little bit of a different take on the genre of fantasy, and I know everybody always says that, so big whoop, but I'm excited about it. I want to do something that's got a little bit of a different perspective than a lot of other fantasy stories I've read has. So we'll see how it turns out, but I'm excited about it. So let's see what this looks like. Sans beans, shall we? See if I can get as many of these back into the bag as I can. Okay, so I don't know if you can actually see that on the screen, but this is going to be transferred over to another surface. I'm all about the light boxing, generally speaking. So we're actually going to go in here and do a little bit of line work with the pen, just so you can see it a little easier on there. And so I have a little better idea of what I'm getting myself into here. I like the idea of this a lot. It's certainly given me a more natural layout than a lot of other methods that I've considered before. I've tried using map making software, not been a big fan, and I think that this gives me a little better control over where things are with all of that, and I really like that aspect of it in particular. This over here has been shattered in a massive cataclysm. It's called the Shattered Isles. So this here is an area of massive turbulence and destruction. There's volcanoes and frequent earthquakes happening down in here. There's a couple of larger islands, but they're very treacherous waters for our intrepid sailors if they're dumb enough to sail down that way. Throw on what is Antarctica in the current world. I'm not sure what we're going to call it in Somnerra, but there's got to be some ice somewhere, right? Start back over here. We're going to go a little peninsula up into that. And then these are called the arms on this particular continent. We've got just a massive batch of shattered land on this. This is a continent in peril. Something that's seen some stuff and been left shaking in the ocean here. I really want some aspects of cosmic horror in this book as well, but I don't want to be the blatant Cthulhu Lovecraft knockoff that has become so popular lately. So that's something that I want to stay away from, despite my absolute love for the Eldritch horror, Lovecraft, Hellboy stuff. But then we come back along here, and this end, we stay a little fuzzy on the actual details on this because this area is quite literally unexplored. I'm kind of excited about the idea of this kind of world that I can create my own fantasy and history and mythology with. I've done a lot of RPGs and that kind of thing, and I've always loved that, but I've never really spent the time I should in creating my own fantasy worlds. This is the first time I've ever written with races other than humans in it, and I'm really curious how this is going to fly because it's something I'm very unfamiliar with. I've never written an elf or an ogre or an orc or anything like that in a game or a book. In fact, even in RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons, I've never played anything but a human, and that's something that I've just realized recently, and I kind of want to examine a little bit by playing with some different species of humanoid. And one thing about Somnerra is it's going to be one of those worlds that there's a lot of history that is untouched by humans in it, and the magic kind of resides in the lower half of the world. It's much stronger down there, and the humans, there are humans in it. They live in this area here and kind of up along the top side here, and for them magic was much different, more superstitious in gods, and less controlled and having control over it. And I like the idea that for them, relatively speaking, the whole thing is a new experience, having magical beings and long-lived items and creatures and things like that. But one thing that humans are good at is watercrafts. And they are the ones that have mastered the oceans and the seas. They're the kind of the Vikings of the area up at the top here. And they're superstitious about magic on the ocean itself, but they're more than happy to embrace magic when it comes to easier lives and building and that kind of thing, because they live up in the harsher area of this world by a significant margin. Just realized I was actually going to make those islands there, so we'll play with that a little bit. I may end up modifying that, putting in a big lake there or something, or cutting the sea in. As you can see, my islands are getting a little square for some reason. I'm not sure why I'm instinctively doing that. That's not intentional, but it's kind of odd choice apparently. It says I do like the bean thing. It gives me a little bit of randomness that I would not have come up with otherwise, but it still gives me the flexibility to say, I want to tweak this a little bit, I want to make this a little different. There I go with this weird square islands again. Apparently this land is very geometric. That's what happens when you have dice sit next to you or something, maybe. Don't know. So this is what I'm going to, for now, consider the basic land mass of the world of Somnerra. In the next one, we'll come back and add mountains and rivers and towns and a little bit of everything. Thanks for watching. This has been the Reformed Grognard. May you live in interesting times.